Well, I've always wanted and planned to live to 100, but now I understand I will have to do so in order to live up to that introduction. I really want to say thank you to you because you have had the generosity of spirit to invite me, a non-technological person, an outside agitator, or whatever it is that I am, to come and share this momentous first occasion of your coming together in these kinds of numbers. And because of that generosity, we have something very rare and precious here this afternoon, which is an hour or so together in this room. So here's my plan. If all goes well, each of us, me included, will leave here with one new fact, one new idea for rebellion, one new feeling of support, one new subversive idea, one new something. And in order to make that happen, I need your help in overcoming this old-fashioned setting we have here of you looking at each other's backs and me looking at you. This is hierarchical, and hierarchy is based on patriarchy, and patriarchy doesn't work anywhere anymore, in your industry, in this room. So I hope that during what is usually called the question and answer period, you will feel free not just to ask questions, but to give us answers. We could all use some. I think this is one of only 2 times that you will all be together in the same room. So I hope you will feel free to use this as an occasion to talk to each other, to make any organizing announcements of upcoming troublemaking meetings or tactics. Come up and use the mic if you like. Stand up and say where the bodies are buried in your company or industry. Or if you'd rather not say it out loud, you can give me a note. I'm leaving early in the morning and I'm self-employed, so there's nothing that I won't read. And generally to turn this into an organizing meeting, because we are all here in this room in a kind of chemical combination that could never have happened before in history and may never happen again. So I hope very much that we make use of it. I know that we each come here from a different world, but we do arrive at a particular time in history, which is the 3rd decade of the second wave of the feminist movement in this country. We call it the second wave. We shouldn't really, because I have on my wall in the office a radical feminist poem from the 2nd century AD. The effort to overthrow or humanize, you can pick your verb depending on the state of your patience this afternoon. The caste systems based on sex and race has been a very long one. But in this young country, as we count our history in this country, we did have 150 years of a suffragist and abolitionist movement which established a legal identity as human beings for women of all races and men of color. Now, in the second wave, we are striving for legal and social equality, and that, no doubt, will take 100 years, and we're only about 25 years into it, so I don't know how to break this to you, but I figure we have at least 75 years to go. But even though we come together at a shared time in history, we each come from our particular world. And in my case, I am arriving from a world that is new to me, because 72 hours ago, I was in Africa, where I had been for a couple of weeks, in Botswana, in the heart of the Kalahari Desert. I had taken a plane to Johannesburg, a plane from Johannesburg to a town in Botswana, to a smaller town, a smaller plane, another smaller plane, a Land Rover, and walked for many miles in order to meet with a group of people collectively known as the San people or the Bush people. In fact, they themselves are composed of many different groups who are living in the Kalahari Desert as well as in many other areas of Africa, as people are living indigenous peoples are living on each continent in our world. Native Americans here, Maori, Aboriginal people in New Zealand and Australia, who are living as people lived for 95% of human history. We were meeting because, and there was never any sound like this. It's interesting to spend 2 weeks with no planes and no sounds at all. We were meeting because they are experiencing the kind of cultural annihilation from their political leadership that we saw in this country towards Native American nations. So they had asked a friend of mine, a Cherokee woman named Rebecca Adamson, who runs something called the First Nations Financial Project, which does economic development in Indian country, appropriate economic development projects on various Indian reservations. They had asked her to come on a kind of indigenous person to indigenous person exchange. And I thought, what an opportunity. So I went with her, and for the first time in my life, slept outdoors for 2 weeks. I mean, I'm not a camping person, okay, but I got to know the women and the men somewhat in this group of bush people who had to drive in a truck 8 hours to come to meet us because the government was so afraid of our seeing the way they lived that they would not let us go to their villages. And I witnessed and heard and participated in the incredibly sophisticated, nuanced, and really very technologically adept society in which they live. It is sophisticated in healing, sophisticated in the art of all kinds of mental communication and the understanding of natural processes. The women took us through a sort of a half-acre of the desert that just had scrub brushes and looked completely barren to us. But with their guidance, we saw how they follow a vine and dig up the much larger root, and that is very nutritious food, how they find and over the years have perfected medicines for all kinds of ailments, how they have natural contraceptives. They space their children so they are on the average of 4 or 5 years apart. There is another kind of plant which permanently puts an end to, brings sterility when they've decided that their childbearing years are over. And, you know, otherwise was part of what is a very sophisticated culture. The reason I say this to you is because I thought of you while I was there often, knowing that this would be the first place I came as soon as I returned. And it made me realize that women have always been the leaders in technology, at least 50% of the leaders, if not more. For 95% of human history on this earth, women were the people who developed the ways in which nature was dealt with, who developed agriculture, who developed language, who developed animal husbandry, who developed the technology of building dams, of building houses, and so on. And in these hunter-gatherer societies, which were relatively sexually equal, if there was an inequality, it was that women were the greater experts, and that the men who were more likely to be the hunters of large animals, whereas women gathered food and hunted small animals, developed into people who were fleet of foot and brave and very nice people, but as one woman said to me, as translated, not very bright. She said to me, a wonderful old woman who gave me a necklace of hers, who said, you know, the trouble with European women, as far as she could see, was that they thought that men were people to talk to. And when in fact men were there for sex and to make babies. She said, it's women you talk to. Now, I'm not trying to say, and nor was she trying to say, that this was a female-dominant society, nor do we want a female-dominant society. We've seen what domination has done for men, and we don't want to do that over again. But the truth is that the leaders of technology have historically, or I should say, what is suspiciously consigned to prehistorically, because they don't want us to learn about it, right? Pre-patriarchy, pre-racism, and so on, have been the leaders in technology. And I think that what we need to do is, in addition to knocking on the doors, making clear that we fit the current definition, that we can integrate, be like, play the same game, compete, excel, and do all of this, which we can do, we need also to change the definitions of the game. Because technology has been defined in a way that keeps women, all women of all races, and various unacceptable races of Native men and men of color out of it. It isn't unique to technology. This has happened in every field. I remember when a young woman came to see me early in the life of Ms. Magazine to explain how our art coverage could be better. And she said, look, art has been defined as what men do in a European tradition. And it costs a lot of money, and it hangs in museums, and people don't see it, and so on. Crafts is what women and natives do, but it's all the same stuff. I said, okay, I see what you mean. You know, I understand. The same is true of the difference between politics and culture. Politics is what happens to men. Culture is what happens to women. But it's really all the same thing. It's just that they say, you can't change that. That's culture. But it is about a power relationship. It is about politics. The same is true of religion. Religion is defined as that which worships a God that looks like the ruling class. Haven't you ever wondered how come God always looks so remarkably like the ruling class? Where is women? Where is nature? Where is everybody else? That is not religion. That is a cult, or that is pagan, or that is spirituality, or whatever, but it is defined out of religion. So I think we need not only to take the current definitions of technology, but to look to someone, a theorist like Sally Gerhardt, and consider a larger definition of technology that sees it as a continuum and understands that the mentality that created the digging stick and the underground oven of such sophistication and dams and huts and so on is the same mentality that creates computers and space travel. That in fact technology is the conscious and systematic manipulation of one's environment for the purpose of reducing one's dependency on environmental factors for survival and for progress. And by that large and real definition, women and the wrong groups of men as viewed by history have in fact always been in the leadership. I was looking to see what the going definitions of technology are, and I noticed that the history of technology seemed to begin around in the 50s, that it originated with the American Society for Engineering Education, which, as far as I can tell, had no female members at that time, nor any members of color, but I could be wrong. But anyway, they didn't seem to be in evidence at this meeting. And that they formed the Society for the History of Technology in 1958. Then I looked in the Journal of Technology and Culture, and I noticed that in a 24-year history, they had 4 articles that had anything to do with women or the inclusion of women. And the first one was in 1976, the first one. It was called The Industrial Revolution in the Home. It was actually quite a good article because it pointed out that technology did not free women in the home, that in fact women in industrial technological societies spend more, full-time homemakers spend more time in the home than women in agricultural societies. That really what we spend our time doing is the care and feeding of technology and waiting for the repair person. And you know, you might look at, if you want some support to make this argument, you could look at John Kenneth Galbraith's great little essay on the economic uses of homemakers, where he points out that once World War II was over and there was not enough consumer power anymore to fuel our overdevelopment in this country, it became important to have a full-time educated consumer in the home as a substitute for the war economy. And that's where our consumerist homemakers came from. But it becomes more and more clear that the definitions are not the full definition of what technology truly is, and that's why we have been left out of it. So I would propose to you that our first task is to define ourselves into it. Not just to knock on the door, but say, hey, you know, you guys have got the wrong room. You are just talking about the last 5,000 years of human history and not talking about women's role in that. Sometimes, actually, when I'm feeling most daring, I think we should just declare the last 5,000 years an experiment that failed and declare ourselves into the post-patriarchal, post-racist age. This is it, folks. This is the first meeting of the post-patriarchal age. But in any case, I do think we need to redefine. And we need to look at things like, well, I was reading about penicillin. Now, I understood that 3 guys had gotten the Nobel Prize for penicillin, but what I didn't realize was that for millennia, literally for millennia, women have been, from Africa to Europe, using the mold that grows on bread and plants and so on in the treatment of wounds. They have been using it forever. There was even a woman in this country who was well recognized. She was a 19th century Wisconsin woman named Elizabeth Stone, who was an early antibiotic therapist and treated lumberjacks' wounds with poultices made of moldy bread and warm milk or water and never lost a patient. Now, I submit that this was as much an invention of penicillin as anything else, but it was the 3 guys who got the Nobel Prize from the guilty man who produced dynamite and therefore gave a prize to make up for the fact that he produced dynamite. We need to look at language when we look at history and note that it's men who chose the wood for arrows and boats and early technology with such care. But the other stuff is always passive. The cooking is done in watertight baskets and underwater ovens and so on, is done. By whom? Who made these baskets? You know, were they chosen with care? We need to think about our language, just as we need to think about it now and not only say how many women are raped, but also how many men are rapists, or not only say how many women are battered, but also how many men batter. We need to think about birth technology and recognize the millennia of female expertise in surgery, herbs, and the birthing chair, which it's taken us 300 years to get back. You know, just when I think that I have nothing left to get angry about, something else comes along. And since I've never had a child, it took me a while to realize that women have been made for the past years that medicine has been taken out of the hands of women healers and into the hands of male professionals, have been made to have their babies against gravity. I mean, no wonder people are pissed, you know? I mean, that's what in most countries of the world, and certainly in rural areas, you have your baby sitting up or squatting, and now there are birthing chairs and so on. But for the convenience of the, well, we could go on about that. So, you know, we need to look at the reality of the past and realize that technology is morally neutral. It depends who controls it, who invented it, who profits from it, and how it is used. At the moment, birth technology is so much out of the hands of women and into the hands of a biased society that rewards the birth of sons, that wherever sex selection has been possible, there have been more boys born than girls, whether it's sex selection before pregnancy or immediately afterwards. And also, there is the growing use of the bodies of poor women as the wombs for the sacred sperm of well-to-do couples that we need to worry about. Yet birth technology really was in the hands of women for thousands of years, and only in the last couple of hundred years did women become the subjects, the passive objects of birth technology. We need to look not only at women's role in the invention of computer language, which I hope is, better recognized than it used to be, but also in the major role that they have played in the past in developing language, agriculture, and so on. In other words, we need to define technology as if women mattered. We also need to look at the values of technology, the values that they reflect, and the way it is used, the way that women have not only been defined out of it, but made to feel wrongly grateful as if technology has helped them. As we have seen, it did not necessarily help us in the home. In fact, it doesn't reduce the number of hours we spend in the home. We are told that the typewriter brought women into the paid labor force. This is absolutely not true. It was the presence of well-educated, native-born women coming into the labor force as cheap labor. And worst of all, we're told that the contraceptive pill created the women's movement, which is really insulting. In a way it did, because we were objecting to the contraceptive pill, if you'll remember, that the high-dose pill, objecting to it created part of the women's health movement, but certainly not the pill itself. And finally, we need to understand that the end doesn't justify the means are the ends. So we need to lead by example. People do what they see, not what they're told. We need to understand that it's in our enlightened self-interest not only to crash the glass ceiling, but also to end the sticky floor of the pink-collar ghetto. Because as long as women, and especially women of color, are identified with low-level jobs, and those jobs are not integrated with men, and especially white men, then it will seem that that's where we all belong, rather than in the upper reaches. And it's very good to organize together with the support staff in any case. They know everything. And it's a very revolutionary and subversive coalition to make together. We need to speak out about unfairness, because if we allow it to be covered up, it will remain covered up. And we will be told that we are victim feminists if we come forth and talk about unfairness. That's a way of blaming the victim. I've never met a victim feminist so far, but maybe there may be somebody somewhere who wants to be a victim, but I haven't noticed a run in that direction. But we need to speak out about the unfairnesses that we see. We need to celebrate each other's successes. I know that there is still some alarm that women are sometimes not supportive of other women, and that is a great pain to all of us. But remember that this kind of internalized oppression is not peculiar to women as a group. On the contrary, it is the same as a Jewish person who wants to be the only Jew in the club, or a African American who wants to be the only African American family in the neighborhood. It is self-hatred, and the miracle is that as many of us escape as do and are able to really celebrate each other. We need to make sure that technology remains as democratic as possible, because everything we know tells us that agrarian societies were the most egalitarian. Industrial skills superimposed on them made them more polarized. technology on top of industrialization may make us less democratic still. So I salute many of you and all of the librarians and all of the great people who are trying to make sure that the information highway doesn't only have Rolls Royces on it. We need to understand that when we get to be a critical mass, we will acquire the same kind of opposition that we had before we were there at all. Usually happens at about a third. You know, when you get to be about a third of a certain workforce, it starts to tilt like a neighborhood suddenly. The whole thing becomes devalued, but don't worry, that's okay. We're gonna just move in and devalue everything. And in every way, understand that the means, that we must choose the means that best reflect the ends we hope to achieve. But if we redefine technology, if we look at the goals and values that technology is after, and if we choose the means that best reflect the ends we want, then I think that we have a chance of really multiplying the change. Here in this room, there is so much power and so much expertise that it could be and will be the heart of an entire revolution. I noticed that even physicists, of which I am told women are still the smallest percentage, but even physicists now admit that the flap of a butterfly's wing here can change the weather thousands of miles away. And it seems to me that the women in this room and the supportive men in this room, just being present in this room will keep you safe in the upcoming revolution. That this is one hell of a butterfly. Thank you. Okay, now it's your turn for organizing announcements, questions, answers. Where's the mic? Right there. But if you don't want to go all the way over to the mic, just stand up, and if people can't hear you, I will repeat so everyone can hear. I had so much more I wanted to read you. I'll read you one thing. I thought you would like to know why men are the inventors of technology. Here's a quote from Theodore Wertheim in 1968. Is this a famous historian of technology? I cite the penis as a primeval concept-forming tool of the primates, and I do so with evidence taken from recent neural inquiries into sex, exploration, and aggressiveness. Man modified primate uses of this instrument as a social weapon by putting a fig leaf over it, but it remains nonetheless a prototype of a whole family of compressing, fire-making, and crepitating devices. I just thought I'd read you a little something while you were walking to the mic. Okay.
Hi, I'm Lisa Stapleton of InfoWorld. I was just wondering if there are any technologies that you found personally very liberating or powerful in your work and in your personal life.
Well, as a writer, obviously, though probably if left to myself, I might still be using a quill pen and sprinkling sand over it. Nonetheless, the process of moving from a manual typewriter, which I felt like I had to stand on each key and leap to the next in order to, to an electric typewriter, to a word processor, to being able to do my research in the way now that you can, with having entered into Modem City, as I think of it. This has been the most personally liberating for me. And I think as a nonlinear form of communication, that it holds a great promise for networking knowledge in the world. I mean, for instance, I noticed that the Aboriginal groups are networking themselves on computer in a way that they could not ever do before because of their living in very removed areas and great difficulty in meeting with each other. but are now have skipped over industrialization, the mechanical, linear, hierarchical forms of communication, and are going immediately to computers as a kind of liberation. And we're going to try to sell this to many of your companies and getting them free computers.
I have two comments. The first one has to do with progress and technology's contribution to true progress. And it sounded as if the historical examples you gave of women's role in technology, in all cases, there was a usefulness and a purpose. There was actual progress in the technology examples you had given. And one of the roles I can see for women today in technology is making sure that what we're really doing with the technology and how we're really using it contributes to the progress of humanity or to the progress of people in general. And I think that women can play a big role there.
Yes, I think that you've hit on the very real difference between philosophies, or between and among philosophies, when it comes to technology. Because there has been in the past a kind of, if it is possible, it must be done philosophy, as opposed to what I hope is a new paradigm coming up, especially from groups that have been less powerful and so have seen the lack of benefit from the previous philosophy, and that is, if it's good for humanity and the environment and the ecology, it must be done. So I think we're beginning to make a differentiation between intelligence and consciousness. Intelligence, yes, it's there, and we have the intelligence to do X, Y, and Z. But consciousness is that which is even more peculiarly human, which is the self-consciousness of the intelligence and the values that intelligence reflects. And that's my hope. I think that is all of our hope, that we are beginning to see that, for instance, overdevelopment is as much or more of a problem in the world as underdevelopment. And so we begin to try to proceed with that in mind. There's one of the essays I was reading in preparation for today talked about dolphins and made a case that dolphins are as intellectually capable as human beings and have developed technology in very, very interesting ways, but in ways that don't penalize the environment. That you could argue that they have communication, they have music, they have art, they have all kinds of technological innovations, but they have they have done it in a way that is in harmony with the environment.
Hi. First of all, I want to personally thank you, Gloria, for all the work you have done so that I could be for all the freedom I have today, so that I wonder what was the fight all about. So it's a great feeling to have.
Well, and having some idea of how much work you've done in
Yeah.
Oregon, and I thank you.
And secondly, I would also like all of us to thank the wonderful men in our lives who are behind our success also. Not just the people we have to fight, but the people who have really, really put us here, including people like, I thank my father every day for what he has done to tell me that there's nothing to fight about. You are equal. I'd like to get your thoughts on something, and the only way I can explain this is sort of in a metaphor. What I find is I've only worked in high tech, which according to Silicon Valley is only computers, nothing else, And so, which means predominantly male organizations. And the way I can explain it is it's sort of like you enter a room and everybody is doing a ballroom dance and you want to do the samba, And so you go through various stages. You first say, what is this dance anyway? I don't know this. Then secondly, you go through, you're mad that they don't want to do the samba. Then the third thing you go through is, well, I'll do samba and nothing else. And then what I started doing, which was interesting, is I stepped on and started doing the ballroom dance, and before the other person knew it, they were doing the samba with me. So what I mean by that is we have to learn to somehow embrace the system and be a part of it, and then bring about a change in it so that our views and our ways of behavior are understood as opposed to fighting the system. And I go through this every day in terms of, why are you so emotional about this? Why are you just so excited about it? Why can't you just, be poised and say the thing as opposed to walking in and going, wow, we got this great account. I mean, so it's this, you have to figure out the system somehow and change it as opposed to standing out and fighting it. So I'd like to hear your views on that.
That's a great way of describing it, don't you think? Of being two different kinds of dances. I think that, a lot of us have had this experience. We've had it for reasons of gender, we've had it for reasons of class, we've had it for reasons of culture, of, many different kinds of feelings. And there actually is a book about this called The Story of O. I'm sorry it's called The Story of O because it's a play on a very cruel book, but it's about what it's like to be an O in a world of X's. And so, first you're regarded as representing all the other O's, and then you're put in charge of the other O's, but you're not supposed to talk to the X's, and then, it goes through all, and it's great because it's removed of any description, and it's true of outsiderness in general. Whether or not we have to learn the going dance depends on where we are. If we are inside someone else's structure, we do have to learn the going dance. Some people's role is to be outside and not to learn the other dance, but to support the people inside who are the dance teachers. So it depends where we are, but I think that if we have the self-confidence to hear our own music and do our own steps, we will, as you described, find people dancing with us. It isn't that one is better than the other, it's just that we need to have the full range of human choices so we can choose the appropriate one for the situation. A hierarchical structure is good for brain surgery, for fire departments, for a certain thing, but it's not good for work teams. There's a very good book by Alfie Kohn called No Contest, which I would say definitively proves that competition does not produce excellence. It's in fact cooperation and mutual support and cherishing of individuality, that produces excellence. So it isn't either or to me, it's both. Both inside and outside the system supporting each other.
Well, it's impossible to talk to Gloria Steinem without mentioning feminism. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. I would like to know from you if feminism is still a valid, modern, and updated movement.
Yes, here we are. This is part of the feminist movement right here. Yeah, I think that if you take as the measure public opinion polls say, which is the only gross, broad brush measure I think I know of, then it is bigger and more and deeper and wider than ever before. There was a poll last month that showed that when given the definition, the dictionary definition of feminism, which is the belief, I would say the fact, but anyway, the belief in the full social, economic, political equality of women and men, 60% of women and 50-some% of men, I think, said they were feminists. So, I think though the way the movement is dealt with, the way the civil rights, the way any social justice movement is dealt with, is first to say it's not necessary, and then after it's necessary anyway to say, well, it used to be necessary, but it's not anymore, now it's over. So we're in the it's over stage, but actually it's much bigger and deeper as far as I can see. I don't go into any community that doesn't have a battered women's shelter, a women's art gallery, women's networking groups professionally like this, but it's totally, totally there, even though the people themselves may believe the press. That's what's so interesting. You know, maybe the most revolutionary thing we can do is to trust our own experience over the myth. Because what I notice is that when I travel around the country, here's what happens to me, typically. I arrive and I'm met by this hearty band of activists, and they say, if it's a place that used to be active in the 60s or something, they say, this is the most apathetic place you've ever been. If it wasn't active in the 60s, this is the most conservative place you've ever been, you know. And we've hired a hall for tonight, we're not sure anybody's gonna come. Then you get to the hall and there, you know, it holds 2 or 3 or 5,000 people, and then there are more people outside, and then they have to set up a closed circuit television set, and then they say, you know, I mean, it's always like that. And then they apologize and say, oh, we think small, you know, we should. It's there, it's absolutely there. But unless we come together in groups like this, we may not know it, because we, by ourselves, are looking at television, reading the newspaper, you know, with words like post-feminism in it, which is like saying post-democracy.
Hi, I just want to say thank you, because being born in 1970, I had the benefit of growing up with a lot of the work that you and your feminist colleagues have accomplished. And my partner and I are both under 30, and we're starting our own business that's dedicated to getting women empowered through technology. And I just want to say that, you know, not all of us, quote, post-feminists are out there to, you know, just, you know, cozy up to the system, that we're out there to rabble-rouse. And I just have a question for all us young folks in the audience who we really look up to you. And, you know, just what can you tell us about, you know, growing up and giving us some advice for the next 25 years so that we can be like you someday?
Well, I didn't understand anything till I was about 34. So you're already far ahead. And I don't think you need my advice. I mean, I think you're doing great, and you're going to be something better than me, which is you. You know, and that's the whole idea, that we help each other to be unique. Now, we can inspire each other, and that's important, because if you've never seen a deer, you can't see a deer. Do you know what I mean? But it isn't that we're trying to be like each other, and I enormously value, I mean, I think I can be helpful with tactics. I can say, well, here's what we did in this situation, here's what we did in that one, maybe I can save you from reinventing the wheel. But you also can be enormously helpful to me and to women, you know, older than you, because you have a much better shit detector than we do. You see, we have this kind of terminal gratitude because we remember when it was worse. And you don't remember when it was worse, thank goodness. So you just see what's wrong and move forward, and that's great. Absolutely great.
Thank you, Gloria. That's it for the question and answer.
Oh, that's all the time we have?
Yes.
Oh, is there anybody else, or are we out of time? One more,
I have
okay.
one more. Gloria, I'd really like to thank you for your comments with regards to women and men of color. And I'd both like to make a comment and ask a quick question. The comment is that I would like everyone in this room to feel a responsibility for making sure that next year's conference includes a lot more women and men of color. And secondly, I'd like to ask you a question that's often posed to me. My role is I'm a diversity manager in a high-tech company. And I've been asked by many people, why is it that women, especially white women, are not taking a more active role in the current affirmative action debate going on in the country? And I would very much like to hear your views on that.
I think that women, certainly the women's organizations, feminist organizations, are taking a very active role about affirmative action, but I think that there is a very racist effort to paint it as an entirely racial issue. And that has been absorbed to some extent by the media, so that when they invite people on a program, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've talked back to my television set a lot, you know, and written a lot of letters saying, hey, you know, I'm glad that you have these spokespeople of color talking about affirmative action, but let's talk to white women too, you know, because this is, you know, you're trying to make it an issue with a smaller constituency of support than it actually has. I think in California there's a, as I understand it, you can tell me if this is right, but I think that there's a peculiar problem because your initiative refers to it as not affirmative action, but what's the phrase? Preferential treatment. So they've co-opted civil rights language, and when it is put out there in public opinion polls, people think they mean preferential treatment, and women who, there's a gender gap on all issues of fairness. So women who see preferential treatment think that's what it means and say, no, they're against it. I don't know what the rules are about having a ballot initiative that doesn't accurately describe what you're voting on, but it would seem to me that since you're voting on affirmative action, it ought to say affirmative action. And when there was a Lewis Harris poll done last month that showed that even the majority of white males who are wrongly categorized as angry white males, I mean, that's unfair to them as well, the majority of them also support affirmative action. So, you know, it's a question of how it's described and how it is stated. I mean, the truth is that affirmative action has raised the standards wherever it has been applied and created standards where there were none. So it's for the good of the country if you enlarge the pool of talent, you get more excellence. It stands to reason. And now the companies and municipal and other government bodies are more in favor of affirmative action than the politicians are, because they've had success with it. They've seen what has happened. So I hope you might consider, you know, going out from today and getting in touch with your neighbors and voters and political representatives and so on, and making very clear that if you do indeed support affirmative action, that you do. And I don't know what you can do. Does anybody know what you can do to get the wording changed in the ballot initiative? There must be something, because it's really too late. But it's very, well, then we need to do a lot of education on that. All right, well, I will end with a couple of quotes from Marge Piercy. Have you ever read her book, Woman on the Edge of Time? It's a wonderful book, and I commend it to any of you who may not have read it, because it posits two different futures. One, the logical extension of the big is better technological approach that is the worst of our impulses now, and the other, a decentralized technology with values approach. And you know, here is just a few quotes from her book saying what the good future is like, what the possible future is like. We have limited resources, we plan cooperatively, we can afford to waste nothing. You might say that it's our religion. Ideas make us see ourselves as partners with water, air, birds, fish, and trees. We learned a lot from societies that people used to call primitive technically, but socially sophisticated. We tried to learn from cultures that dealt well with handling conflict, promoting cooperation, coming of age, growing a sense of community, getting sick, aging, going mad, dying. In Piercy's utopia, science and technology are not informed by a master-slave relationship with nature. Nature is not an other which must be obeyed to be commanded, but a partner in existence. More than this, the people have a healthy respect for immanence, which is best illustrated by their calm acceptance of the fact of mortality. Everybody gives back, says one of her characters. We all carry our death at the core. If you don't know, and there are two kinds of knowledge posited in this book, out knowledge, which is the current scientific mode, and in knowledge, which is the intuitive mode. If you don't know that, your life is hollow, no. Death reminds them that we're part of the web of nature. Don't you find that beautiful? Thank you.